And I want to thank Representative Walker for letting me chair this today. Mr. Secretary, if you can call the roll, please.
Representative Blanton. Representative Bojanowski. Representative Bratcher.
Here.
Representative Dietz.
Here.
Representative Dossett. Representative Freeland.
Here.
Representative Fugit.
Here.
Representative Gooch.
Here.
Representative Hart.
Here.
Representative Johnson.
Here.
Representative Cook.
Here.
Representative Lewis. Representative Maddox.
Here.
Representative Massaroni. Representative Proctor.
Here.
Representative Raymer. Representative Stalker.
Present.
Representative Stevenson. Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Present.
Representative Thomas.
Present.
Representative Wesley.
Here.
Chair Sharp.
Present. All right. Representative Dietz, if you would like to have your distinguished vet come up to the front and introduce him, and if he could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd appreciate that. We could all stand and then remain standing for the prayer by Representative Fugit.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, thank you for a new day. Thank you for your blessings on us, Lord, the ability to be here today to serve you and to serve our people all across the state of Kentucky. Lord, thank you for this committee. Thank you for the opportunities that we get, Lord, here in this committee to honor those who serve us, who have served us. And thank you for our military, our public protectors, first responders, our troopers and police officers and paramedics. Please keep them safe. Watch out over them. And Lord, may we live today to please you. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Fugit. Representative Dietz.
Good morning. It is my great honor and privilege to introduce Sergeant Charlie Duncan, who has a long and successful career serving our nation. And when I asked him this morning when he was going to slow down, he doesn't have any plans for that. In 1973, Sergeant Duncan left for recruit training at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in Parris Island, South Carolina. After completing boot camp, he served with the Marine Fighter Attack Squadron as an aircraft weapons specialist on the F-4J Phantom jet fighter. From 1973 to 1977, Sergeant Duncan was at both Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort, South Carolina, and served aboard the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz and spent 17 months at sea on board the carrier. After finishing his time at sea, he went to the Naval Air Station in Millington, Tennessee for 5 months before being sent to the Marine Aircraft Group 41 in Atlanta, Georgia. From 1978 to 1980, Sergeant Duncan completed training as an aerial observer in OV-10's Bronco twin turboprop light attack and observation aircraft, and as a gunner in AH-1J Cobra attack helicopters. Afterwards, he was transferred to Marine Light Helicopter Squadron at Marine Corps Air Station, New River, North Carolina, for duty from 1980 to 1983. Next, he was stationed aboard the USS Iwo Jima in a combat tour in Lebanon with Special Detachment of Marines just before his barracks were bombed in 1983, followed by a short deployment with the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit deployed in Grenada. After this tour, he lived in California from 1983 to 1986, where he served as served as the Ordnance Chief and Senior Aerial Gunnery Instructor for Marine Aircraft Group 16. From 1989 to 1993, he returned to Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort with Marine Fighter Attack 251 for a tour that included some time in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait during Desert Storm, and a Westpac cruise to Japan and the Far East. In 1989, he graduated from Southern Illinois University with a degree in aviation management. Sergeant Duncan then, in 1993, assumed command of the detachment at the U.S. Embassy in Seoul, South Korea, and Cairo, Egypt, on 18-month tours at each post. After completing these tours, Sergeant Duncan transferred back to Marine Aircraft Group 26, Marine Corps Air Station New River, serving from 1995 to 1997. After serving 24 years protecting our country, he retired in July of 1997 as Master Gunnery Sergeant and Aviation Ordnance Chief. After retiring from the military, Sergeant Duncan went to Comair Aviation Academy and for 13 years flew for Comair. He then retired again and in 2014 was hired as a police officer in Kenton County, where he still works as a sergeant and shift supervisor. He lives in Erlanger with his wife Janet, who is a teacher in Covington for special needs students. He has a daughter named Courtney and a son named Kyle, who's also a police officer, and he has 5 grandchildren. Sergeant Duncan has dedicated his life to protecting our country both at home and abroad and still protects our community as a police officer. So I'd like to thank him for his service to our country and then turn the microphone over to him to say a few words.
I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here and represent veterans across the country. Obviously, it has been tough on veterans for years, and it will continue to be so as the numbers dwindle and the challenges of civilian life overweighs what the military can provide. And it does require a special challenge. What I like to do, if you'll indulge me for a moment, is I like to recognize a couple of other veterans that are dear to my heart. The first one is my father. He served in the United States Army during the Second World War, was with the 36th Infantry Division, made the landing at Salerno in Italy, served in North Africa. He was medevaced back to Africa and back to the United States, where he was discharged from the Army in 1946. He had 2 brothers that served, one in the Navy, one in the Army. My mother, her only brother, served in the Navy. I have a cousin that is a retired Marine who was my inspiration for the Marine Corps. As a young child, he kind of was like a big brother to me. After that, when I joined the Marine Corps, I dedicated the 24 years. I wanted to be there, so if the call came, I could give the same service that my forefathers had given. My wife, she also was a Marine. She served 4 years in the Marine Corps. She was the first woman aerial gunnery instructor in the Marine Corps for helicopters, and she also was the first woman assigned to an offensive nuclear weapons unit. Her uncle was a Marine who served on Iwo Jima and earned the Silver Star while he was there, and then they sent him back to the United States very rapidly when they learned that he was 16 years old. From there, my family also jumped into the frying pan. My son did 4 years in the Marines, serving with the 9th Engineers on Okinawa and other places around the world. My daughter did 6 years in the Army as a medic. She's now a nurse. And her husband just joined the Army, and he's at boot camp right now. So we have a distinguished family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think we can say you and your family are truly patriots to this nation, and we appreciate it. Where's your son-in-law basic training at?
He is in South Carolina right now at Fort Jackson in South Carolina. This is week 3 starting for him right now. So
he's getting
as
into
with
the
all
fun.
my family and all my friends, I send a letter a day because I know how important it is. And I always include some kind of a comic strip in there for him to share for the other soldiers and the people that are there. But I enjoy it.
Well, we appreciate your service and continuing to serve the community here in Kentucky, and and thanks for coming up and being our distinguished veteran for the day. And I have a coin here I'd like to present to you.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got several bills to hear in committee today. The first up we got is going to be House Bill 64, sponsored by Representative Wade Williams.
Thank you, Chairman, Committee, for hearing my bill. My name is Wade Williams. I'm the representative for the 4th Legislative District, and hearing that story of going to basic training and company commander of a basic training unit, I don't envy what's ahead of him in the next few weeks. So I wish him all the luck. What I'm here to talk to you about today is House Bill 64. This bill addresses an unforeseen effect in a detail of the POPs legislation that was passed in the early 90s by this General Assembly. And when POPs took effect, it allowed for a grandfathering clause for those that had already been certified through a police academy. And one of the section of this legislation required that these grandfather status individuals had 90 days to retain employment once they retired. And what this bill does is extend that 90 days to a one-year process, or to allow for a one-year time limit, to allow them to kind of, even some jobs that they go into would require them to set out to get back into the retirement system. So some of them, which are at 90 days, even the 30-day mark, it makes it difficult to communicate that with the retirement system and process that individual paperwork that you need. So what this bill basically does is just extend that window from 90 days to 1 year to
Second.
We have a motion by Representative Fugit and a second by Representative Blanton. Do we have any discussion? Mr. Secretary, can you call the roll? Oh, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Representative Lafferty.
So what you're saying is this will allow them to go back to work?
and keep their certification status. They don't have to go back to the academy again.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Right.
Do we have any other questions? Mr. Secretary?
Representative Blanton,
Aye.
Representative Bojanowski, Representative Bratcher,
Yes.
Representative Dietz,
Yes.
Representative Dossett,
Yes.
Representative Freeland,
Yes.
Representative Fugit,
Yes.
Representative Gooch, Representative Hart,
Yes.
Representative Johnson,
Yes.
Representative Cook,
Yes.
Representative Lewis, Representative Maddox,
Yes.
Representative Massaroni,
Yes.
Representative Proctor,
Yes.
Representative Raymer, Representative Stalker,
Yes.
Representative Stevenson, Representative Tackett Lafferty,
Yes.
Representative Thomas,
Aye.
Representative Wesley,
Yes.
Chair Sharp.
Aye. All right, it passes. Bill passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and particularly Representative Dossett for his help with this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is House Bill 115, sponsored by Representative Bill Wesley. Okay. I got that marked in, but thanks for reminding me. Representative Wesley, I understand we have a sub.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I have a motion on the sub. Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right. Representative, please.
Mr. Chairman and committee, thank you for having us today. Past couple of years, I've had the privilege of working with canine units throughout the state of Kentucky, patrol dogs, narcotics, search and rescue, but I've never seen these dogs operate like this. And we have 3 electronic detection dogs in the state of Kentucky. And I'm going to turn this over to our friend liaison Angela Parker for KSP, doing a phenomenal job here in the state, and she's going to introduce our guests.
Good morning.
I'm Angela Parker. I'm legislative liaison. I'm sorry. I'm Angela Parker. I'm the legislative liaison for Kentucky State Police. And
I'm Sergeant Leslie Strong with the Kentucky State Police.
thank you so much for having us this morning. We are very appreciative to Representative Wesley for sponsoring this bill and allowing us to work with him in the interim on the language that we find very important in this statute. When Sergeant Strong was studying for promotion recently, she noticed that there was a gap in the assault on a service animal statute, where the definitions are so narrowly defined at the moment that harm to our canine May, who's hiding under the table at the moment. May is an electronic device detection canine, and under the current statute, any harm to canine May or her partner Cam, who's also attending this morning in the audience, any harm to these important canines would not be covered under assault on a service animal at this time. So Representative Wesley worked with us in the interim to add the definition for electronic device detection dogs so that they would be covered by the statute, but also to add the generic police dog definition to cover any canines that are working in police service for any agency in the Commonwealth, so that we don't have to come back and continually redefine the statute, because we can never anticipate the amazing things that these canines can do in service for law enforcement. And so I'd like to turn it over to Sergeant Strong to explain to you the kind of work that May does, and a little bit about her history and the training and the things that they do.
Thank you for having me. Fair warning, feel free to cut me off, because when you tell me to talk about my dog, I will talk about my dog. So as they said earlier, these are electronic storage device detection canines, and we use them as part of the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And we investigate child sexual exploitation online as part of that task force. And that involves a lot of residential search warrants looking for electronic devices. So we, in particular, we use these dogs to not only speed up the search process in general, but to locate devices that we may not find otherwise because they've been hidden because they have evidence on them. She found her food pouch just now. So May joined us in March 2021 as the first ever ESD canine in Kentucky, working with law enforcement. And a little bit later, in August of 2022, we saw a need for another dog. So that's when we got Cam and Detective Sims, his handler. And my favorite part about these dogs, other than the ability to find these electronics, is they are what we call a career change dog. That's a very nice way to say that they flunked out of service school. But because of that, we're also able to use them as comfort dogs. And on these search warrants, unfortunately, we come across child victims that are in these residences on these search warrants. And when my favorite part is when you go in these houses and you see these dogs search, which is amazing enough, it's incredible enough on its own, and then you see them kind of switch gears after they find all these electronics, and you're in a room with a child that's been a victim of these crimes, and you know they've been a victim of these crimes because you've seen the images and the videos before you walk in the house. And the child's crying, and they're confused, and they're scared, and they don't quite understand what's going on. And you feel helpless, and then you look down next to this child and you see your dog. And you see this child with their arms wrapped around that dog's neck, hugging just as tight as they can hug. And you hear him say, "I love you so much, May. You're such a good dog." That's why I feel like these dogs are important, and we need these dogs. And I think that we owe it to them to protect these dogs because they protect our children.
Motion.
As amended by the sub.
I have a motion as amended by the sub and a second. Are there any questions?
Good morning. I'm Representative Sarah Stalker in District 34 in Jefferson County. My question for you is, could you talk a little bit about, are there specific types of electronic devices that they are trained specifically to seek out? And if so, what are those devices?
Yeah, so they're specifically, we utilize them to find any sort of electronic that has a storage capability. And they're not, a lot of people ask how they even do that. So they're actually trained to detect a specific chemical that is in these electronics. It's called triphenylphosphine oxide. So they're actually, they don't realize they're searching for electronics. They think they're searching for this chemical, but that's specifically what we use them for.
One more question, please.
Sure.
The other question is outside of this work that's specifically connected to children who are being exploited, are they used in any other types of searches that do not fall within that scope of work?
Yeah, so we, excuse me, we, any sort of electronic device that's missing, or I think recently we had a murder case in Johnson County we assisted with. The suspect had made some phone calls or something. There was some GPS information they felt that maybe on his phone, and he had driven back in a coal mine somewhere and thrown the phone out in the weeds. And they called May to come help them search for that. So it's not, as part of the task force that we're on, that's primarily what we investigate, but really any crime involving an electronic that they can help with, we're available for.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. First is, what is the cost of the canine through training and maintenance?
So the actual price tag on the dogs is around $34,000 to $35,000. But both of these dogs, we were actually able to receive grant funding for the dogs, so we didn't pay a dime for them.
Well, that's great. The other question I got is, where are some of the locations in a house you find these electronic devices?
Everywhere. I mean, you can imagine if you just sit and think, we have so many electronics in our house now that we don't even realize. I mean, even your refrigerators can be a smart refrigerator now. So anything like that that has any sort of storage capacity, these dogs will alert on.
Where was the most unusual place?
That's a good question. I would say the most surprising to me, because it was actually our first search together, was a suspect had actually hidden the phone from us. And she went around the room and she alerted, and I'm still thinking this is voodoo. I'm just enjoying having a dog, right? Because I still didn't, I'd never handled a dog before I got May. So I was kind of learning as I went as well. And she alerted on what I thought was a shelf. And so I searched the shelf and there was absolutely nothing there for her to alert on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is our first search. This isn't good. So I turned her around and looked, and there was actually a pile of clothes in the floor. And I looked at her and I was like, I think you're messing with me, but okay. So I tear through the whole pile of clothes, and on the main bottom of that pile of clothes was the suspect's phone that he was exclusively using to download child sexual exploitation.
Okay, thanks. We had another question. Representative Lafferty.
I'll begin with the question just to make certain that the committee sub does still include the police dog definition, correct?
So if you would turn to the last page on line 7, that will kind of do away with that. That's what that's about. It says that if such force is necessary to protect himself or herself with the third person against the use of unlawful physical use of the service animal. We didn't think that should have been in there, so we just went ahead and disregarded that.
But the definition of police dog, which means basically any dog that is owned or the service of which is employed by a law enforcement agency, we're making it more broad to
Yes, ma'am.
include all of these dogs, correct? Because as you know, I appreciate, Representative, that you allowed me to sign on here as a primary co-sponsor.
Yes, ma'am.
To lend some bipartisan support to this bill because, as most of you know, in my district, last summer, we did have the tragic shooting of officers in our county. We lost 3 officers. I'd like to name them: Captain Frazier, Deputy Petrie, and Officer Chaffins. And alongside those officers, we also lost a service dog. We also lost a police dog. His canine, that canine was named Drago. And that was very important. This legislation is very important to my community, and I thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would like to add also to that with KSP, I believe that there's three of these dogs throughout the state that needs to be protected under this definition. We've worked with patrol dogs, narcotic dogs, search and rescue, and these dogs are not covered, and so that's why we was here today to ask the committee to adopt these dogs into this definition.
Okay, thank you. Representative Stevenson.
I want to first thank you for your passion for your job and for animals. I appreciate it. And the question I have, really, I'm just a little curious. It says no one can be convicted of an assault on a service animal when the animal uses unlawful force.
That's the sub that's and that's going to
Oh,
be
that's out now?
Yeah, yes,
Because I
ma'am.
wanted to know what was unlawful force
Yes,
by a
ma'am.
dog.
So that was added in at the last minute without any of our discretion,
Got it.
and it was a misunderstanding. So
No, that's all right. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Mr. Secretary.
Representative Blanton.
Aye.
Representative Bojanowski. Representative Bratcher.
Yes.
Representative Dietz.
Yes.
Representative Dossett.
Yes.
Representative Freeland.
Yes.
Representative Fugit. Representative Gooch. Representative Hart.
Yes.
Representative Johnson.
Yes.
Representative Cook.
Yes.
Representative Lewis. Representative Maddox.
Yes.
Representative Massaroni.
Yes.
Representative Proctor.
Yes.
Representative Raymer. Representative Stalker.
Yes.
Representative Stevenson.
Yes.
Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Yes.
Representative Thomas.
Aye.
Representative Wesley.
yes.
Chair Sharp.
Aye. Well, the bill passes unanimously. I appreciate that. And as far as retired law enforcement, these dogs are a force multiplier and very much needed in the law enforcement field. And I appreciate you guys bringing your canines down today. I really do.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also add that during the interim, they're going to be putting on a demonstration to give a little insight what these dogs are about and how they detect these electronics. If that would be all right with you.
That would
During
be
the
fine
interim.
if you want to make an announcement of where and exactly what time.
Yes, sir. I think last month we done one, or a couple months ago, where they did search and seizure and drug narcotics, and we've been practicing on wearing the bite suit. So I think this would be a good opportunity to see what these dogs are made of. Thank you, sir.
Where and what time?
It'll be during the interim.
Okay.
Probably in the spring or summer.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you very much. And the next one we got up on the list is House Bill 373 by Representative Blanton. If you'd go ahead and introduce yourself and your guest, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Blanton, representative for the 92nd District, and my guest with me today is Director John Moberly of the Kentucky Law Enforcement Council. Hereby, you're going to hear it referred to as KLEC. We welcome Director Moberly and appreciate him being here. I do have a committee sub. I'd asked for that committee sub.
We have a motion. We have a second. Go ahead, Representative Blanton.
All in favor?
All in favor? All right, passes.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 373, prior to the committee sub, is a cleanup language for the Kentucky Law Enforcement Council. Over the past, I believe, about 3 years, we've passed some legislation dealing with revocation of police officer certification here in Kentucky to get rid of our bad actors and make it easier for them to pull their certification. This is merely some cleanup language on that, along with it would replace the current court security officer revocation requirements with the more substantial standards within KRS 15391, which would allow for all sex crime convictions to be prohibited and revocable, unlike currently in KRS. Now, that's what the original 373 does. What the committee sub does, we found some technical errors in that, and I will let that part of the committee sub and House Bill 373, I'll let Director Moberly explain.
Okay. Mr. Chairman and representatives, thank you all very much for this opportunity again. My name is John Moberly, Kentucky Law Enforcement Council. We have, in the initial submission, 10 different statutes that actually go back into about 2007. Most of them, most of the amendments that we are addressing did come after 2017, but most of these involve a variety of things involving revocation clarifications, certification categories, all things that we wanted to make sure are clear to, that are clear to the law enforcement and to the public that we serve. The crux of some of the changes are basically removing old language. In many cases, a statute existed, for example, involving the court security officers. It came about in 2007. That was updated several years later, and the old language was left. So we wanted to clear out some of that old language. We wanted to ensure that we're using the standards that have been passed in the recent years for revocation purposes, accountability, that we're applying all of those across the board. And that's another piece that this legislation also does. For example, one thing that we had asked for a couple of years ago, and working with the chiefs and the Sheriff's Association, was to have the ability to subpoena information involving officers who have broke the law, broken public trust, and the language that had been provided in that did not allow us to utilize that subpoena power until a 13B hearing had already been initiated. We actually need that subpoena power just in case, and it would be rare. Actually, to this point, we have had nearly 100% cooperation with law enforcement, but we need that just in case there is a situation where we believe there is additional information that we may need to revoke an officer on. It all comes down to protecting the public, and that's what this language and what we're trying to do here with this House bill today.
And now I will finish the rest of the committee sub. It does deal with POP certifications. Number one, it would apparently, we have had a situation in the Commonwealth recently where a county judge attempted to make an arrest in a neighboring county. We have found actually there is some statute that allows some limited arrest powers. So what the committee sub, the remainder of the committee sub would require any county judge executive that chooses to execute these powers of arrest, they would have to have a POP certification provided by the Department of Criminal Justice training in Kentucky in order for them to be able to make an arrest. So I have spoken with several county judges that didn't even know this existed, and they have no intentions of doing POP certification, and they have no problem with us putting this in place. Secondly, it would require all future sheriffs in the Commonwealth to be POP certified. If you'll recall, I believe it was last year we required all constables, newly elected constables, to receive this training as well. Currently in Kentucky, there's about 8 or 9 sheriffs that are not already POP certified out of the 120. we would grandfather all the current sheriffs in this legislation. Any newly elected sheriff, you could run for sheriff, you could be elected, and you could serve, but if you didn't have the POP certification after this goes into the effect, you just wouldn't have arrest powers, police officer powers. So we are grandfathering the current ones in. I have spoke with the Sheriff's Association and have had positive communication with them about this addition, and they have not raised any concerns at this point. And the third and the final thing it does is it does the same thing for deputy jailers as it does for sheriffs. Actually, deputy jailers would rarely, if ever, need an arrest power, and so it would require deputy jailers to become POP certified if they choose to use any arrest powers provided in that position. However, they could still serve as deputy jailers. They just wouldn't have any arrest powers. Again, rarely ever needed, if any. Most people would spend a career as a deputy jailer and never ever need that power. And we are grandfathering all current ones in. I have spoke to jailers, and I have spoke to the Jailers Association, and at this time, the conversations have been positive, and they've raised no concerns. That's what this bill with the committee sub will do in its totality, and we would be glad to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Motion on the bill.
Got a motion and a second. We have a question here by Representative Fugit.
Representative Blanton, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Blanton, when you talk about arrest powers, so if a guy came to the jail to turn himself in, and the deputy jailers execute an FTA, because that's arresting them, right? Would they still be able to serve those warrants if somebody came to the sheriff's office and turned themselves in? Could they execute those arrest warrants for somebody turning themselves in?
The current ones would be able to, yes. Any new hires, then the jailer himself would have to execute those, or a local PD or sheriff or trooper if they happen to be at the jail.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, and Representative Lafferty.
How much do these POP certifications usually cost?
So in Kentucky, it's fairly unique. So there is a POPS, Peace Officer Professional Standards. It's divided into two pieces. The first half is your fitness testing. There is no cost for that. You also have drug testing, which there is a minimal cost for that, less than $20. There's a polygraph and what we call suitability testing. Altogether, the expense is around $120 per individual.
And is that usually, follow up, please? Is that usually paid by the individual or by the office?
Typically by the hiring agency.
Right.
I have heard that there are agencies that have requested reimbursement, but I think in most cases, it will be the hiring agency.
Okay.
And I would follow that up. Going through the POP certification actually costs several $1,000s, but that is all covered under DOCJT to actually do the training, but DOCJT covers that expense.
Correct.
Okay. Oh, because obviously I feel training is a very good thing,
Yes,
obviously, but I also have some concerns about some of our smaller communities. Will this prevent them from being able to retain and recruit officers to work in their facilities? Do you think that'll be a hindrance?
No, ma'am, I really don't. I've been in this position for about 2.5 years, and we have been able to keep our expenses down. It actually cost us much more to offer these services. We have not changed the actual cost in about 15 years, or maybe a little bit longer. So that has not been something that has really come up or raised as a concern by the chiefs or sheriffs.
And I will add, in speaking with the Jailers Association, was told by their folks that jailers had actually been seeking training for their deputy jailers, and thought this might be a good fit for them because they had been for the last few years trying to seek out training for the deputy jailers.
Yeah, hold on just a second, if you would. We got Representative Bratcher.
The POP certification, that includes them completing the academy in Richmond, is that correct?
Yes, sir, it does, absolutely. Or
Okay.
if it were KSP, same thing, Louisville
Right,
Metro,
Louisville.
Lexington. Yes,
So
sir.
they complete academy and they keep current by doing these testing and stuff, right?
The testing is pre-employment.
Okay.
They take the test as a peace officer professional standards testing, make sure that they can meet all the standards. They start the academy. There's a test by statute that they have to take first day or within the first few days of the academy. There's an exit test. Then after that, the requirement becomes in-service training. The 40 hours of required training per year. The POPs testing or the suitability, those types of testing are not required annually after that.
I think I agree with, that if people are going to make arrests, they need to have that certification. My concern is we have constables out there that can't get into the academy. So you have you have these sheriffs that get elected, and you have other people that are 2 years out trying to get in the academy, and they want to go, but it's not a fact of. It's a fact of they just can't get in because there's no space or no room or they don't have the funds. So how do we handle situations like that when we have a sheriff that's elected or we have a constable? And I know constables aren't used in a lot of places, but in some rural areas, that's their only that's the only law enforcement agency they have. So how are we going to handle a situation when you have a constable that doesn't, is in an area that's their only law enforcement? All of a sudden, they don't have any arrest powers because they can't get in the academy for 2 years. And
Well, first of all, I would say this bill doesn't deal with constables. Secondly, I would say that no one is impacted to where they can't go ahead and be hired and be doing their job. They just can't make arrest until that availability comes open. And thirdly, I would say that if this General Assembly would find a way to find more funding to send to DOCJT, we could solve a lot of those issues about getting people in a timely manner and getting them trained. It's like everything else. It all boils down to money. Staff costs money, training costs money, and if we'll properly fund them, then I think we could solve that problem. But I also think Director Mobley may have a response as well.
Yeah, that is a priority. We want to get people in as quickly as possible. On the POPs testing side, we oversee the accountability of all academies. We don't have a backlog on the POPs testing. It's about 6-7 days generally, and we offer it in multiple places throughout the state. We want to be as accommodating as possible. The academies, I know for DLCJT in particular, this is affected, mostly by, and I don't have an exact number, but I know that wait time has began to reduce, and I believe it's somewhere between 4 and 6 months currently. So we are looking for ways to try to, I know that the training side of it, we're looking at ways to offer up other and new options that go beyond just bringing people to Richmond. And these are conversations that multiple academies are having to try to be aware of modernizing the training and expediting getting these folks in, because it is important. And with the shortage of law enforcement that's out there right now, it's really at the critical stage that we prioritize that. But I think funding is much needed for those individuals. Sir.
Representative Stocker.
Good morning. A question for you. Could you speak a little bit to some of the safety precautions when it comes to screening folks who you might be recruiting? We talked about the fact that they go through the academy, that there's polygraphs, that there's drug testing, that there's physical tests, that they don't have arrest powers. Right. What I'm not hearing anything about that's really critical to me is about anybody who might have a history or a charge of a sex offense against a child. I'd like to hear what you all go into on the back end of that.
You mind?
Go ahead.
So this is critical. I mean, the clear thing is to obtain the best applicants that you possibly can. And so Kentucky has really taken the lead nationally to identify and to create stronger revocation laws, basically ability to remove those individuals. But the House, the Senate, just in the last year, created under Chapter 15391, our ability to stop an individual who has had any sex crime in their background from ever becoming a law enforcement officer. We're just one in the nation that has gone to those lengths. The actual process to screen these individuals out is basically called suitability. And so we contract with an organization that is ran by an organization of psychologists, and that's what they help us with. Basically, they identify flags through a series of questioning, which is also supported by the polygraph, and that information in itself is provided back to the hiring agency, and that hiring agency should take that information and, with those flags, should be able to say whether this candidate is a good candidate or there are strong concerns. For those individuals that we do become very concerned about, I have in the past have made personal calls to a sheriff or to a chief to say, hey, this came out in the polygraph. I don't know if you're aware of this. Just be aware. And typically they do their diligence and will not hire somebody with that type of background. But we're always looking for ways to not only streamline, but to ensure that we're filtering out, because we want the best that we possibly can. We do not want to lower our standards at any point. We've seen that happen in Memphis. We've seen it happen in many cases where standards have lessened, and in those cases, you almost always have negative results in the long run.
One more question. I did hear you say typically we will not hire.
So that is up to the chief or to the sheriff, to the executive person of that agency. So statutorily, if somebody were to admit to things that they've never been criminally charged with, they could be hired.
Fascinating.
So, but when I say typically, I think most chiefs, most sheriffs will obviously not hire somebody with that type of background. If that makes sense.
Well,
and I would add that, especially your larger agencies, they do very thorough background investigations on these individuals. That type of information would be brought out, and they would not be hired if they have those type of situations. I think it would surprise you. I spent time reviewing many background investigations, how small of a thing could get you kicked out of the process. That's not even considered criminal, but it's about having the best people in these positions. And reiterate what Director Moberly said, the fear I have a lot of times when I'm sitting here in Frankfort and we're in session is some of the things that are being piled on law enforcement that is pushing them to lower their standards. When we lower our standards, we're going to have more problems out of police. The bigger agencies set a very high standard, but when we get forced into doing things and we're not being able to recruit, just like the pay that was given to KSP last year, that helped tremendously. We see that in the class that just started this weekend with the number of people. And so those type things help us to hold to those standards. Now, a sheriff and a small county hiring is different than KSP hiring, okay? They have their own process, their hiring process that they go through.
So I didn't get a chance to ask my question before there was additional commentary, but I think at this point, well, let me ask the question. My next question was going to be, what about anybody who has any sort of history of domestic violence?
Correct. That is a clear flag, and that is something that unless they have a conviction that would prohibit them under statute, that is somebody that could be hired.
So just to be clear, somebody could potentially be abusing a spouse, or a partner,
Correct.
or a child, and as long as charges were never pressed, and they weren't convicted, they could be hired. Somebody could also potentially disclose information about abusing children from a sexual nature and could still be hired at the discretion of that individual.
Very unlikely, but absolutely, yes. And
Right,
that's-
unlikely, but it's possible. It is at an individual's discretion.
Yes, the hiring entity's discretion, yes, ma'am.
Okay. That is a real red flag for me, and I hope that that's a red flag for other people that are sitting on this committee. As somebody who's based out of Jefferson County, we had a real issue in Louisville with a program called the Explorer Program. And there was a lot of children that were hurt in the presence of people with a lot of power where they should have been safe, and they weren't. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for clarification, is KLEC or DOCJT the hiring authority of these candidates?
No, ma'am. Or no, sir. We are not.
And
It would be the
who is
actual
the
employer.
hiring authority?
It would be the city or the county organization, the police department or the sheriff.
All right, so it's the local people that make the decision on whether to hire. You just provide the information.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And I believe Representative Gooch has a question.
Thank you, Representative. When I think of the academy, I think it's very extensive training, probably very rigorous training. I guess my question is, when you talk about maybe a local sheriff, someone who's been a public service servant all their life decides they're going to run for sheriff, and they do, and they're middle-aged and beyond. Is there a possibility that I don't think the average person off the street could probably go in and do that training at the academy without having first been in good shape or whatever? That's my question. Will we have a real problem with someone that got elected sheriff because he's elected by the people, but maybe not being able to stand up to the rigors of the training?
Well, I would first of all contend that he can still be sheriff. We have several sheriffs in the Commonwealth of Kentucky who basically serve as administrator of their office. They're not out doing patrol duties and so forth and so on, and don't utilize those arrest powers. They could still serve as sheriff. Doesn't prevent that. It just, if they're utilizing their arrest powers, and that they would have to receive the POP certification, and it's a move to bring more professionalism to our law enforcement in the Commonwealth.
Okay, can I follow up one question? Okay, and I understand that. The other question is POP certification and retraining. One of the prerequisites for them getting the bonuses that's paid out through the insurance premium tax.
Yes.
Okay, so if you say that deputy sheriffs then could qualify for this, then they probably would be in favor because they're probably going to get more money.
Deputy sheriffs are already a part of the CLEP fund.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, if we have no other questions, Mr. Secretary.
Representative Blanton.
Aye.
Representative Bojanowski.
Pass.
Representative Bratcher.
Yes.
Representative Dietz.
Yes.
Representative Dossett.
Yes.
Representative Freeland.
Yes.
Representative Fugit.
Yes.
Representative Gooch. Yes. Representative Hart. Representative Johnson.
Yes.
Representative Cook.
Yes.
Representative Lewis.
Yes, and can I get a yes vote on the previous two bills?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Maddox.
Yes.
Representative Massaroni.
Yes.
Representative Proctor.
Yes.
Representative Raymer. Representative Sharp.
Aye.
Representative Stalker.
No.
Representative Stevenson. Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Explain my vote, please.
Go ahead.
I'm going to pass on this today. I came in here of course, I'm supportive of a lot of what you said, Representative. I agree, just as with police officers and with teachers. I think that we don't want to lower our standards and that the pay helps. I think that, my son actually in high school has chosen a pathway of law enforcement, and I would like to, for his safety and the safety of our community, make sure that they have the best training possible. Just some of the conversation about how this may affect some of our more rural counties, because as I spoke earlier about our officers lost, I saw the cringe when our small county lost 3 officers in one day, and we lost others that were injured that day. So in a county that maybe employs 10 people, we lost a handful of officers, and how this will affect our county. So I'm going to pass today just because I'd like to reach out to my sheriffs and my jailers, and I hope they fully support this and say this is the direction we need to go. But I'd like to hear from them first. Thank you.
Representative Thomas.
Aye.
Representative Wesley.
Yes.
All right, and it passes the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
And next we have up Joint House Resolution 69, sponsored by Representative Duvall. Representative Duvall, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Robert Duvall. I'm a representative from District 17. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, appreciate the opportunity to share with you this morning. So Joint Resolution 69 does one thing. It directs the governor to recognize the newly created Board of Radon
Motion
Safety.
on the resolution.
We have a motion. We have a second. Do we have any questions? We have a question over here by Representative Bojanowski.
So could you just explain what the resolution does, please?
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and continue with my background, and I think this will answer your question. So basically, it directs the governor to recognize the newly created Board of Radon Safety as the state entity to receive and administer the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency state indoor radon grant funding in accordance with statute. So by way of background, for those who aren't familiar, radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in Kentucky, and it kills literally thousands each year. And this committee actually heard a presentation on radon this past November. The unfortunate situation is that our state's radon program has been in disarray for years, with no enforcement over the certification of radon testing and mitigation contractors, and without a robust public health education program. So Representative Kevin Bratcher sponsored House Bill 77 last session that should have put Kentucky on a path to a comprehensive state radon program through the creation of an independent Board of Radon Safety in the Public Protection Cabinet. And the governor signed House Bill 77 into law March 31st, 2022. But the key funding mechanism to oversee enforcement and programming was never transferred to the Department of Public Health over to the new board as House Bill 77 directed. As previously referenced, this funding is from the EPA's State Indoor Radon Grant, commonly referred to as the SURGE program, and KRS 309.434 specifically directed these SURGE funds to be administered by the new Board of Radon Safety. However, after the EPA learned of the passage of House Bill 79, it asked the governor to certify the new Radon Board as the state entity that has the legal authority to receive these federal surge funds as required by EPA's regulatory process. But the governor declined to certify the Board of Radon Safety as the statute directed, and instead named the Cabinet for Health and Family Services as the entity to receive those funds. So this resolution basically makes it clear that the General Assembly's intent through House Bill 77 remains the same today, which is for these funds to be under the direction of the Board of Radon Safety to assist with enforcement and education of radon safety for our commonwealth.
Okay, we got a question here from Representative Bratcher.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. So basically, the federal government gave us money for a radon awareness and protection program for the people that are dying of cancer from radon in our state because radon levels are so high. And then those funds were kind of misappropriated and not used in the right direction by the governor. Is that correct?
Correct. They've not been sent to the board, the new board created. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Representative Massaroni.
And this board is the EPA, correct? Under the EPA?
That's who is sending who the funds are from. The surge funds are from the EPA. Yes.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Representative Bojanowski.
If I may ask, so you said that in the answer to the question to Representative Brad, the funds were misappropriated. So I'm not understanding that the funds were misappropriated. What I'm understanding is that the governor's office said that another agency was responsible for the funds. But while that's not following the intent of the General Assembly, could you actually call that misappropriation? I mean, the funds, I'm not understanding how that would be misappropriation.
Well, they've not been directed to the new board that was created. That's the best way to say it.
Correct, which would be not following the General Assembly's intent, but I wouldn't interpret that as misappropriation. Thank you.
Okay.
Representative Bratcher.
The federal government gave us funds. The funds aren't being directed in the manner in which they were intended to the right area they're needed, which is the definition of a misappropriation. Thank you.
And Representative Stevenson, did you have a question?
So I just want to understand, I want to be really clear that is this money that was given been used to buy dog food or something else for which it was not intended?
To my knowledge, the funds have not been spent on anything at this point, but I don't know that for sure.
And has anybody reached out to the federal government to ask the question, is this inappropriate, or is it in the governor's discretion where to direct these funds for the proper use?
So there is a letter from the EPA dated June 1st of 2022. And it is from Senior General Law Attorney Robin Allen from the EPA, basically referencing House Bill 77, and I will read a quote from House Bill 77. Have that available here.
I guess my question
okay,
is,
sure.
Have you looked to see if there is, I'm objecting to the characterization of a sitting governor's actions as misappropriation when there's no proof that that has happened.
Well, the funds were asked to be sent to the new board that was created under House Bill 77, and that letter that letter was sent from the EPA requesting that. And then there was a response from the governor's office. The response was requested for 14 days. That was in June. And there was a response on September 27th, 2022 from the governor's office. And I will quote the letter, and it says, this letter is to communicate that the Commonwealth of Kentucky retains the designation of the Department of Public Health within Kentucky's Cabinet for Health and Family Services as the lead state agency for the EPA surge on behalf of Kentucky. So that was the response. But House Bill 77, and I can read it, quote it, but is clear that the funds from the surge program should have been directed toward the new board that was created for radon safety.
Per the General Assembly and not per the EPA. I mean, it's what the General Assembly wanted.
That is the intent of the General Assembly that was passed in the last session, and then also signed by the governor in March. Okay. Correct.
Thank you.
Representative Stocker.
Question. So I was not here in 2022, but I want to make sure that I'm clear as well as anybody else here who might benefit from this. House Bill 77, from the General Assembly's perspective, was trying to accomplish two things: to create the board, the advisory board.
Correct.
Okay, that's correct. And then to ask for that grant, which is a federal grant that is administered through the EPA, to move from the cabinet for health and family services, which is where it lives right now, over to an advisory board. Correct?
It would have previously been as part of the cabinet. Yes. Let me read that statement for you.
Sure. Thank you.
So yes, it would have previously been part of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. However, once again, I want to read a quote from the statute, and it's I think it's very clear, and I'll read it. I don't believe there's any room for misinterpretation. It basically says, quote, let me say this: the legislature created the Kentucky Board of Radon Safety to, among other duties, and then, quote, enter into agreements with any federal or state agency, political subdivision, post-secondary education institution, nonprofit organization, or other person or entity to assist and administer grants received by the board, including but not limited to the Environmental Protection Agency State Indoor Radon Grant Program, end quote. So it's very clear.
Okay. My other question, one more question, please.
Go ahead.
Did the governor's office then ask you to provide a plan on your capacity to administer this federal grant?
I'm not aware of any request.
Okay. What I heard you say from the response that you read from the governor's office, what I heard, and tell me if this is what you heard, is we let you form the board. However, we are still choosing for this grant to be run through the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, correct?
That was the response, correct.
And it's also my understanding that if we remove this grant from the governor's ability, this just feels like we're trying to just take something away from him to give it to somebody else when there's not necessarily any need. I'm not sure why we would want a federal grant that's always been administered underneath that cabinet, which seems to make a really sensible place to me for it to be housed. It's always been there potentially. They have the capacity to do it. They've been doing it. I don't know why we would want to move it outside of the cabinet over to a board.
From my understanding, historically, that there's not been a robust program for radon safety in the Commonwealth, and this was an attempt by the General Assembly with House Bill 77 to create a new board that would put greater emphasis and attention toward education of radon safety.
One more question?
Sure.
So couldn't we be using that board then to be in an advisory capacity to the cabinet? Can both things exist, I guess, is my question. We have the board, which was one of the asks, right? That was one of the wins that you got, which makes sense. I think there's obviously a need for it. So I'm glad that passed.
Right.
I'm just wondering why we need to do anything outside of that other than to use them in their expertise to advise the cabinet where the grant lives so that they can administer those funds most appropriately and effectively to bring down those cases for Kentuckians.
So Chris Nolan has a little bit more of the historical background, and so I'll let him speak to that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Chris Nolan with the Kentucky, the Radon Safety Professionals is who I represent, and been following this issue for many years here in the Commonwealth. The state has a radon program, a radon mitigation program that includes both the certification, which used to be licensure, but now a certification of radon professionals who do the testing and mitigation of radon in Kentucky in homes and buildings and businesses and schools and the like. And that program also had an educational component to it as well, and it was housed in the Department of Public Health. It has since been moved by the General Assembly from the Department of Public Health, at no objection from them, over to an independent board of radon safety that would house the new radon program for the state of Kentucky. So the EPA grant is designed to supplement and support state radon programs. So when the state radon program was moved from the Department for Public Health over to Public Protection Cabinet as an independent board, the legislation was designed for all those monies to then follow it, so that that board had a budget to actually operate and enforce. The cabinet or the Department for Public Health was not enforcing any of the certification requirements of professionals in the state. We haven't had enforcement in years. So that's why the whole program was moved, so it could have a dedicated enforcement branch. So the language of this resolution simply reiterates the intent of the General Assembly is for the board to have those funds in order to operate.
Thank you.
I have a question here. Last year, House Bill 77, did it direct or request this money be transferred?
I would say probably both, because it very clearly in statute says that the board shall be able to accept and expend funds that are given to it, including the funds from the federal EPA surge grant, which is the bulk of the funds that the state has received for the management of the radon program for the state.
Okay, thank you. Representative Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Wall, who makes laws in Kentucky? What branch of government?
That would be the legislators. Yes.
And so in 2022, the General Assembly passed a piece of legislation establishing all this. It went through the process. It was signed into law by governor and becomes law of the land, correct?
Correct.
And all your resolution is doing is saying it's the law and we must follow it. Is that correct?
Correct.
I just want to clarify for all the things that's going on for those people watching at home, for the smoke and mirrors. This is law in Kentucky. None of us are above the law, and we're to follow the laws that are set into place by the General Assembly, and that's all this is requesting.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have another question from Representative Bojanowski.
Yes, following up with what Representative Blanton just said, we also need to read these laws and know exactly what they say. So the law in House Bill 77 said that the board shall enter into agreements with federal or state agencies, including the Environmental Protection Agency. I don't see language in this bill that says that the money must be transferred. And my question is, if the cabinet entered into the agreement, the board didn't enter the agreement, I don't see language in the bill as written that says that the money needs to be transferred. So it's semantics, but I think when we have the law and we read what it says, we need to follow what it says. And if it's not stated correctly, then we need to change it. But it does say that they shall enter into agreements. It does not specifically say that agreements should be transferred to them.
Do we have any other questions? All right, Mr. Secretary.
Representative Blanton.
Aye.
Representative Bojanowski.
No.
Representative Bratcher.
Yes.
Representative Dietz.
Yes.
Representative Dossett. Representative Freeland. Representative Fugit. Representative Gooch.
Yes.
Representative Hart. Representative Johnson.
Yes.
Representative Cook. Representative Lewis.
Yes.
Representative Maddox.
Yes.
Representative Massaroni.
Pass.
Representative Proctor.
Yes.
Representative Raymer. Representative Stalker.
No.
Representative Stevenson.
No.
Representative Tackett Lafferty. Representative Thomas.
Aye.
Representative Wesley.
Yes.
Chair Sharp.
Aye.
too many people.
We're going to keep the meeting open for a minute. We have some people that are in another committee hearing, and hopefully we'll get them over here in just a second.
If I may record a vote for House Bill 64 and House Bill 115, I'd like to record a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll change my vote to a yes.
Mazzaroni. It passes. All right. And the House Joint Resolution passes. Do we have any other business? Then stand by.
To try to get one more vote. For anyone who's left here still that didn't run off to another meeting or another event there, the National Guard, Boudin National Guard, on March 13th at 10 o'clock, we're hoping session will either be 2 or 4, but from 10 to 2 has invited us over to Boone Center for a briefing from General Lamberton, and then also an air flight over Frankfurt in helicopters there. So in case, I put a very rudimentary sign-up sheet right there in case y'all want to sign up to do that. And then they're going to be sending out a formal invitation through email, so kind of watch your emails too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you. All right. We're going to have a motion to adjourn.